morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which side of the world you're watching us from. If you're sitting in a marina somewhere in Spain, welcome aboard and congratulations, or if you're tucked behind an island in Vanuatu, great to have you with us. I'm glad you're here. I'm Captain Dietmar, and welcome back to another Ocean Posse Weekly Briefing. You know, I was thinking about something this week. Actually, I've been thinking about coconuts. What do they have to do with sailing? Every coconut tree you've ever seen growing on a tropical beach started somewhere else. One day a coconut falls off a palm tree, rolls down the beach into the water. It doesn't know where it's going. There's no weather routing. There's no predict wind, and there's no chart plotter for it. There's no float plan. There's no visa. There's no cruising permit. It just drifts off, and sometimes for weeks or months. And ocean currents, trade winds, storms, carry this little floating vessel across the ocean, and eventually one lucky coconut lands on the beach. The husk keeps it afloat, the shell protects what's inside, and now it takes root. And after a few months, there's another palm tree and another place where someday a sailor might anchor nearby, row ashore, and enjoy a beach in the shade. That's kind of like us. Most of us didn't have a perfect plan either. We started with an idea, we bought a boat, sailed to Mexico, crossed an ocean, and retired somewhere warm. It started small, and then one voyage became another, one anchorage led to another, and then one sailor introduced you to another, and one story of recommendation changed your cruising plans forever. Before long, you looked back and realized your entire life has drifted into a completely different world. That's what I love about this community. The Ocean Posse has never really been about boats. Boats are simply the excuse. It's always been about people and the adventure dust. Sharing information, helping each other, making fewer mistakes because somebody else had made them first. Finding those anchorages that don't appear in the glossy brochures. Learning which marinas is actually safe during a hurricane season and finding out where the propane guy actually is. That's real cruising. We're not crowdsourced gamification of human desire to stand out. And we're not influencers standing on the bow with a drone controller. This is real-world cruising. The little things, the conversations, the friendships, the stories you still be telling in 20 years from now. And this week's quote comes from Euclides. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, they return again. Everything comes around eventually. Trade winds, ocean currents, seasons, El Nino, friends. You leave a place thinking you'll never see them again, and then 5 years later, you're anchored right next to them in a whole different country on a different ocean. That's cruising. This week's fleet update has a little bit of everything. We've got one of the most beautiful cruising grounds in the Mediterranean. We've got Fiji Gathering in Fiji celebrating the South Pacific season. And we're entering into one of the most remote atolls of the earth. We've got the goods on the Spanish ham. We'll talk about why your chartplotter might be lying to you. We've got more Starlink news. We'll talk about the touchscreen navigation and a few things happening in Panama. We'll visit a marina in Jamaica, and we'll talk about the upcoming Ocean Posse season events in Cannes and in Cartagena, Spain, in San Diego, and in Annapolis. And quite a few other little nuggets that I think you're worth knowing about. So, pour yourself another coffee, or maybe something a little stronger if the sun is setting wherever you are. And let's sail around the world for a while. First, our pictures of the week. I always enjoy this part, not because they're perfect photographs, although some of them are spectacular, but because every picture has a story behind it. And one of our members thought, I should share this with the fleet. That's what we love. The first picture this week comes from the Maddalena Archipelago in northeast Sardinia. I've not been there yet, but it looks like a spectacular cruising ground. Thanks to Small World 3, who provided the info about some of the anchorages and how to get in and out of it. And look at the Maltese Falcon. Yep, also there. La Maddalena, northeast Sardinia, what a cruising ground. Darren and Karen stayed there for a while. They're in no rush. 2 weeks at anchor, pay the park fee, enjoy. One of those places that rewards you when you slow down. The weekend warriors and charter boats hustle through, but you get to stay. It's a place to wander, go swimming, read a book, listen to some fun music, and maybe have another glass of wine. Watch another boat arrive, and talk to complete strangers, using your hands and best Italian vocabulary you gleaned from some movies in the past. By sunset, you are no longer strangers. They bring over some appetizers, and you pop open some good rum. People often ask me, what's your favorite anchorage? I don't think I just have one. It's like asking what sunset was your favorite. Everyone is different, everyone is enjoyable. This week we also reintroduced Marina di Forio. It's another Ocean Posse sponsor, just across from the mainland from Sardinia. It's a great facility with Ocean Posse discounts, which are nice. Everybody likes a little saving a few euros, but what sailors really remember is how they were treated. Did somebody catch your lines? Did they smile? Hospitality isn't expensive, but it's incredibly valuable. And I'm pleased whenever we find marinas that genuinely understand cruising sailors. Now, speaking of journeys, let's head a few thousand miles west. Our little coconut has had a very good week. It's crossed half the world because while some of our fleet is enjoying summer in the Mediterranean, another Ocean Posse family gathering is coming up in Fiji. And that's where we're heading next. 5 minutes ago, we were sitting in a little cafe in Sardinia drinking espresso, and now we're halfway around the world. And somehow it still amazes you that one day you're eating pasta and a month later somebody's handing you a fresh mango. Our little coconut has been busy too. After months at sea, it washes up in Fiji. Now, if you're a coconut, you've had a pretty successful voyage. And if you're a sailor, you've probably had an even better one. Because unlike a coconut, you remember every mile, every squall, and every sunrise. Every flying fish that somehow landed in the cockpit at 2 o'clock in the morning. That said, we're not a convoy. We're not racing anybody. People leave Mexico at different times. Some stop in the Marquesas for 6 weeks. Others spend 2 years in French Polynesia. Some disappear into the Tuamotus and forget what day of the week it is. The ocean doesn't care about schedules. Eventually, though, those little currents start bringing people together again. One boat arrives, then another, then another. And pretty soon, there are 20 boats for our event in Fiji. Before long, you've got a little floating village, and that's one of my favorite things to watch. Good sailors tend to find each other. And this year's gathering, Savu Savu at Navi Island, should be another great one. If you've never been, Fiji has a way of getting under your skin. People smile, children wave, the markets are colorful with curry and kava roots. The anchorages are beautiful and surf's up, and somehow life slows down again. And one thing I always tell people heading into the Pacific, don't rush through it. I've met quite a few sailors who over the years who tried to do the Pacific in one season. That's a bit like trying to see Europe in a week. Technically possibly, but completely missing the point. We spent 7.5 years in the South Pacific and visited 300 islands, but there are 10,000 more. So if you fall in love with an island, good. Stay another week. Nobody ever looked back and said, I really wish I'd spent less time in paradise. Now, let's wander a little further southeast, actually to one of the strangest places in the Pacific, which is Beveridge Reef. Beveridge Reef technically is part of the island nation of Nui, but it's a place that feels almost unreal. Imagine sailing for days. Nothing, just ocean, and then suddenly the sea changes color. The waves begin to break, you think it's a reef or a shipwreck, and the water turns from deep blue to turquoise. And there, almost invisible, no big radar signatures to speak of, an enormous coral reef, a lagoon, an atoll, sitting hundreds of miles from anywhere. No town, no marina, no fuel dock, no supermarket, just a coral atoll, with fish and silence. Wonderful silence. If you haven't experienced true silence at sea, it's difficult to describe. Just the wind, the waves, and a still ocean inside a teacup, and you suddenly realize the world isn't actually noisy. People are. The ocean isn't. I've always thought places like Beveridge Reef reminded us why we started sailing. Nobody goes there because it's convenient. Nobody accidentally ends up there. If you look at it on Google Maps, it isn't even indexed. We have to go to Landsat and use the program to download and made an MB tile for everybody. We're just that curious. And we're that curious because there's still places on the chart that will one day cease to exist. This is your very own Atlantis before it sinks into the ocean. Places that feel wonderfully wild. And I hope they stay that way. Now, our little coconut would drift straight across this lagoon. It simply keeps going. The wind will blow it across the reef. But one of my sections every week is Meet the Fleet. I genuinely enjoy reading about the people on yachts. The interesting part is people who decided to untie the dock lines. Life is better when the horizon keeps changing. And that's probably the biggest misconception about cruising. People think it's about escaping. I don't think it is. At least not for most of us. We're not running away, we're running towards something. The amazing life between destinations. And speaking of growing, there's something else we've been working on that I think is really exciting. Spanish lessons for cruisers. And soon, French as well. Now I know what some of you are thinking. I'll just use Google Translate. Sure, it works. Most of the time. But there's something wonderful about being able to greet someone in their own language, order bread, thank the customs officer, ask where the market is, and suddenly you're not just visiting, you're participating, and people notice that and they appreciate it. All right, our coconut has drifted far enough for one day, so let's pull it back aboard for a moment, because next I want to talk to you about something every modern sailor depends on, and almost nobody questions enough: your chart plotter. Every now and then it lies to you. We now have more technology on our boats than commercial ships had 30 years ago. We've got chart plotters, radar, fast satellite communications, departure planning, digital charts, depth sounders, autopilots that steer better than most people, and somehow we still manage to hit rocks. I've always found that interesting because it tells me something. The problem usually isn't the technology. Its technology gives us false confidence in what is displayed, and sometimes a little too much confidence. One of the articles in this week's fleet update is called "Your Chart Plotter is Lying to You." Now, before Garmin, Raymarine, B&G gets angry, your chart plotter isn't really lying. It's simply showing you exactly what somebody told you years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 50. That's the important bit. Charts are only as good as the survey behind them. And if an island or a shoreline was surveyed pre-GPS and is now WGS aligned, then you will wind up on the reef if you trust the chart. Think about that. Some of those original charts were incredibly good, especially considering the tools they had. But they weren't magic. And the GPS in your boat today is usually incredibly accurate. So the problem is the chart underneath it might be 30 meters wrong or half a mile off. This means that your chart plotter confidently tells you you're exactly here, when in reality the island, the rock, is somewhere else. I learned that lesson years ago when I hit a rock in Costa Rica. That rock now has my name on it. You get to name a rock you hit. Turns out the satellite knew exactly where it was. The old chart didn't. My mistake to navigate with only one source of information. But it was dark, so my eyes could not see the rock. Could have used radar, but the rock was barely above water. And had I used satellite imagery from 4 sources, only one would have shown me the rock awash. And I would have used that little voice in my head that says, this doesn't quite look right. And that's called seamanship. And unfortunately, there isn't an app for that. And one thing I'm really excited about is the seminar we're doing on OpenCPN and satellite charts. We're doing 3 of them throughout the month of August. And I honestly think this is one of the biggest improvements recreational sailors have seen in years. Satellite imagery isn't perfect. Nothing is. Clouds get in the way, the tide changes, the image was taken at high tide, late in the day, the shading is all not that perfect. But when you combine satellite imagery, good charts, depth sounder, radar, and your eyes, now you've suddenly got a much better picture of what's really around you, especially entering remote and unknown anchorages, in places where nobody has done a modern hydrographic survey. The best navigation system is the one between your ears. Everything else is simply helping it. Speaking of electronics, it's time to talk about Starlink, everybody's favorite topic, or maybe least favorite lately. Seems every few months we get another email, a new plan, new rules, new pricing, and new terms. Everybody immediately asks, what does this mean for cruisers? The answer, sometimes we don't know immediately. We all learn together. I use Starlink myself, like many of you. It's been absolutely revolutionary. Weather files, big downloads, video calls, fleet tracking, calls with family in 4K, which 10 years would have sounded like a science fiction movie. Today it's almost normal. It's also a reminder, never become completely dependent on one company, or one system, or one gadget, because companies change. Their business models change, prices change, the ocean doesn't. HF radio still works, cellular networks keep improving, Wi-Fi keeps improving. Always have options. Redundancy isn't just for bilge pumps, it's for your communications too. This next story made me smile. Touchscreens, or maybe the beginning of the end of touchscreens. China recently announced regulations requiring physical buttons again for essential vehicle controls. Now, before anybody writes and says, cars aren't boats, I know, but the principle is exactly the same. When things get exciting, you don't want to hunt through menus. Imagine you're entering a harbor, 30 knots of wind, rain, 2 ferries, fishing boats, current, and your crew's asking questions, and somewhere inside 3 different touchscreen menus is a foghorn, or the radar gain, or the autopilot disengage, or the music volume so you can hear again. That's madness. I've never been convinced that replacing every switch with a touchscreen was progress. Sometimes progress means making something simpler, not more complicated. I actually think we'll see the pendulum swing back. Physical controls, real buttons, knobs you can find in the dark, things you can operate with wet hands without taking your eyes off the horizon, things that work after a lightning strike. That's good design, especially offshore. And here's something I always remind myself. The ocean has never once cared how expensive my electronics were. It doesn't care what brand name is on the chart plotter. It doesn't care how many inches the display is. It only cares whether I respect the conditions, and that's a very honest relationship. It simply rewards preparation and punishes complacency. Meanwhile, our little coconut still doesn't own a chart plotter. No software updates, no subscription fees, no firmware, no reboots, no passwords, just currents, trade winds, and patience. Finishing up today, this is where our coconut finally comes ashore, because every voyage, even one that starts with a single drifting coconut, eventually finds a beach. Which brings me to Cannes. Every year I look forward to it, not because of the yachts, although, let's be honest, there are some pretty incredible yachts there. It's because every year people that I've only seen on the screen, heard on a call, or followed on our tracking screen suddenly become real. Somebody walks up, sticks out their hand and says, "Hey Captain, we've been following the Ocean Posse for 5 years now," or "We've crossed the Pacific with you," or "Please let me try this rum." We're sick and tired of hearing about Flor de Caña rum. Those moments, they're worth everything, because suddenly the strange little online community becomes real. Faces, voices, stories, laughter. You don't need the biggest boat, you don't need the newest boat, you don't even need to be on your boat. You may be shopping for a new catamaran. Just come and say hello. We'll have our Ocean Posse street party at Taqueria Lupita during the Cannes Yachting Festival. There'll be sailors from all over the world, some industry folks, and everybody has a story. And every one of those stories starts with the exact same thing: untying the dock lines. None of us really know when this journey was going to end. Turns out we were buying an entirely different life, and I don't think many of us would trade it back. So thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing your stories, your photographs, your anchorages, where you are right now, your local knowledge, your mistakes, and your victories. The Ocean Posse only exists because thousands of sailors are willing to help the next one.
Sail out, sail away, make way.